who needs no introduction.
I'm best known as playing an annoying Sloane who's always on her smartphone, so that was a stretch.
So thank you, Sally, so much for coming along to talk to everybody today. Oh, sorry.
No need for that.
Yes, just in case you don't know who she is.
You had a good day?
Sorry.
Do you know what? My notes from use, they say, I am magic. I was just thinking on the way here about how we met. I've been making a documentary on NIPT screening, which is the new, you've heard already about the new Down syndrome test. And in doing so, I met Hayley at a learning disability conference in Edinburgh. And I thought I'd come dressed as Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Because it's become code, hasn't it, in the learning disability world, to say if you're a friend of Hayley's, we all know what you mean. We all know that you mean that you're up for equal human rights for people, that you think life is valuable, whatever package it comes in. And so I'm really proud to be standing here with you.
And, yeah, it was amazing to meet, and we have a shared purpose. So, and Sally, what you're doing on the documentary is amazing. So when it comes out, you'll all be learning a lot from that. But we want to talk to you really, not about how our paths cross, which is interesting, but about how we're very similar, and about how the ethics of NIPT and the meanings hidden within the language that we all choose to use and the terminology that we all choose to use really shapes the way that we think about learning disability. And we're going to be asking a few ethical questions as well, and asking for your help, and hopefully joining everybody up. So hopefully it'll work. It'll all go according to plan. I always stop crying as soon as I see that picture. However many times I do this talk. So I want to take you through our personal journey, and Sally and I are going to sort of, in tandem, talk about our family stories, because actually they really have many similarities and some differences, and I think it's really important to hear our personal stories. So when I look at these two very naive people, they were simply chasing their dreams, which included sort of shopping sprees, exotic holidays, career goals, and lots of lions. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. They were absolutely oblivious to the world's differences and the unexpected paths that life takes us all on. And they were arrogantly thought they could plan every single step of their futures together. We had absolutely no idea about the real world, supporting others, taking joy in simple pleasures, living for the moment. We grew up in a world where learning disability was physically segregated, removed from society, institutionalized. We thought we knew better. We thought we were open-minded and unprejudiced, but we were ignorant. And deep in our hearts was the partner of ignorance, which is fear.
So yes, we were slightly less together probably than Hayley, and we call him Captain Bob. That's us on our wedding day. As you can see, I got my veil caught on the chair as Andy was signing the register and nearly fell over. We both lived abroad as kids, and we've always felt slightly like outsiders anyway, I think. So yes, in some ways, I guess we were well prepared for our lives. We weren't married to conformity, let's just say that. However, we were specifically afraid of DS, I think, of Down syndrome in the way that the general public are. 9 out of 10 people in the UK have never had a disabled person in their home. They don't know anything about it, and we were like those people. Andrew in church specifically used to have fights with the autistic guy. And I'd go, why? He's got autism. He doesn't. Why are you making an issue of it? And he just couldn't get on with him at all. And Yes, I had a really weird picture, if I think about it, of what a disability was. I had a good friend of mine who worked with people with learning disabilities, and she used to tell me about that everybody went mad on a full moon, which is ridiculous. And I had the old pictures of bad haircuts. A very, very outdated picture, basically.
Outdated picture. We don't mind what the sex of the baby is as long as it's healthy. We unthinkingly stated when pregnant with both our girls. But what if one of them wasn't? What dangerous subtext had we internalised over the years? Outdated thinking, as Sally says. When we refused invasive tests following several miscarriages offered routinely for peace of mind because of the risk to an unborn healthy baby, we were again accepting the unspoken lie that the life of a baby with health complications or, heaven forbid, a learning disability was worth just a little bit less than one that did not.
There isn't a picture of me pregnant because I was so fat I wouldn't fit on a camera. I did actually over double my weight. And yes, so I'll just go straight into talking about the test. So that I just didn't really think about it. I did the tests, and we were, in inverted commas, lucky enough to be at the Royal Free in London, where Professor Goleniowska had just invented, inverted commas again, the nuchal fold translucency scan. So I was the first batch of people that did that. And I remember lying down on the bed for the ultrasound and just almost hearing a voice saying, "Your baby's got Down syndrome." And so I started to cry, I went into sort of traditional grieving mode. And then the whatever they're called, sonologist, whatever, stenographer, something, what? You know, medical people. that woman, that lady, it was actually a guy, that guy with the stuff, he said, "Oh no, 1 in 10,000 chance, so your baby's absolutely fine." So that was a huge relief, and I rang everyone saying, "Our baby's absolutely fine." Again, you can see the language I was using, fine. So what is Down syndrome not fine? I've learned that, of course, it is. And my pregnancy, I had a very unhappy pregnancy. I just felt something was wrong the whole time. I felt disturbed and worried. I was in the antenatal unit a lot. They didn't find anything. I was being scanned a lot. They didn't find anything. The baby was breech, poor muscle tone. It's very common for babies with Down syndrome not to turn around. We tried to turn the baby, and it didn't manage. So I'll go back over to you for the next stage.
You had an intuition. I had no intuition, and we arrogantly shrugged off a 1 in 273 risk of having a baby with Down syndrome. Because, of course, that just does not happen to a healthy, vitamin-taking woman who's read every single pregnancy manual in Waterstones.
I also had read every single pregnancy manual in Waterstones, and I had been sent some by well-meaning friends. And the one thing they all had in common from, did you do the natural pregnancy where you were just eating hemp? There's ones that tell you to, did you try and eat 12 things a day, the American one? There's 12 daily dozen of 12 things. So that's why I put on so much weight. I was trying to eat these 12 things a day, every day. And the one thing they all have in common is, for certainly 11 years ago when I had Ollie, is they all talk about Down syndrome as, you know, one of the very worst things that could happen. One of the, you know, this is more than a suboptimal outcome. This is a bad outcome. And this is the language that, in making the documentary, I heard used in the hospitals that we visited and filmed it, that even though the doctors were being filmed, even though they knew they were not supposed to use the word risk of Down syndrome and a good result as opposed to a bad result, this is a language that even on their very best behaviour they couldn't help using.
Risk of flying, risk of drowning, risk of flooding, risk of death. It's a very negatively loaded word, just by itself. And right there is where society's attitudes get off to learning disability on the wrong foot. It's right there in the womb.
Is that me?
Hi, baby.
This is so smooth.
Our youngest daughter, Natalia, came into our world after a calm, planned home labour, natural, at home. She was small, she was silent, and she was blue. And she was born on the bathroom floor. And what is followed is just etched in my mind forever and frozen in my heart. The look of sheer panic on the midwife's face as she performed mouth to mouth. My husband standing in boxer shorts in a freezing December lane waiting to flag down an ambulance. Overly jovial paramedics helping me to the ambulance. And our midwife repeating over and over how beautiful our baby was, as if she was trying to convince herself. Why was she saying that? Nobody said that when Mia was born. They said she had hands like shovels. And as I looked past the little oxygen tube in the ambulance, and looked at her newborn face, which was so unlike her sister's, my brain dared not formulate a question. My mouth couldn't shape the words because I was terrified of hearing what I thought was my very worst nightmare. How wrong I was. Hours later, while Natalia lay on a intensive care ward away from us, the thunderbolt of the diagnosis, or as Dominic said this morning, identification of Down syndrome was given very formally, along with confirmation of the heart condition. Our community midwife cried. This shouldn't happen to such a lovely family. And her tears drove a wedge into the bond between my baby and
As you can see, I have a
different story.
No, look, I'm crying. As you can see, I haven't had the diagnosis at this point. So I didn't have a home birth. Ollie was breech. I had to have a cesarean in hospital. I took the anaesthetic very, very badly. I had lots of complications, and everyone was very worried about me. Baby was born. Ollie. I'd been expecting a girl, so now he was a boy, and so that was a surprise. And he scored 9 out of 10. Is it Apgar? Apgar. I remember he had very, very white hands, and because I'd been so scared and had this feeling something was wrong, my mother had come. My mother was there, and she kept saying, "He's not gripping my fingers, he's not gripping my fingers." And everyone's going, oh, shut up, Mum, it's fine. Quite critical mother, you know, like, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, shush. And anyway, so it's a cesarean, so I was in for a few days, and the midwife knew. And, or she had suspicions, I now realise. Because she kept talking to us very gently and kindly. And she at one stage asked if we had any Chinese blood. And Andrew, you can imagine Andrew and I, my husband and I, a pair of twits, just made endless jokes about this for about 3/4 of an hour, teased her mercilessly, and she didn't bring it up again. I asked the doctor, I told you I had massive weight gain, right? And I was horrified to discover I only lost a stone in the labour. So I put on 5. Not joking. I put on 5, and I'd only lost 1, so there I was 4 stone overweight. And I asked the doctor when she came round if Ollie... I was really laughing because his eyes were... I thought he couldn't open his eyes because I'd eaten too many cream cakes. And he was too fat. And I asked the doctor... I mean, it's funny, but it's awful, isn't it awful? So I said, does he look like that because I've eaten too much? And the doctor said, maybe. Right? Maybe. I hadn't relived this until the train on the way down. I was like, oh my word, because I never talk about the diagnosis, sorry, because why would you talk about it? Anyway, so that delayed his diagnosis. So then we went home, and we had our visit from our community midwife, who came in and looked at him and knew, I'm sure, and said, it says on his notes, floppy, don't worry about that, and ran away. And then 2 days later, we had another community midwife come, and she didn't say a single word. She just took him to the window and examined him. And then she ran away. Now, in this time, Ollie couldn't feed. So here's where the medical angels come in for us. I've got lots of medical friends. Lots. I'm very lucky. And my husband's and my best friend, she does rugby with him and baking with me. Di is a super nurse. She's a consultant nurse in rheumatology, and she's Ollie's godmother. And she stayed up all night with, you guys are so great. She stayed up all night with a tiny bottle and remembering her training, puncturing the teat a few more times to help Ollie. She got him to have 30 mils of milk during one night. Anyway, the feeding was a nightmare. And because everyone was too scared to deliver the diagnosis, Ollie's health was seriously endangered. So it wasn't until 10 days, I'm going to cry now.
This is why it matters.
Yeah, so it wasn't until 10 days after birth that we were called back into the hospital. And the doctor said he was going to check him for Down syndrome. And then I went into shock, which you know, but I didn't know, involved me doing that. That's an actress. It's like, gosh, can you imagine if someone did shock like that in casualty? Yeah, and he said, I'm so sorry. And there was a lovely nurse there who cried for us. But again, for all that it was incredibly sweet of her, what a sweet person to care for us like that, it was all underlining the idea that this was a terrible tragedy. So I'd read in the books it was a tragedy, I'd been screened for the tragedy had happened, and everyone around me, all the experts, were confirming that it was indeed a tragedy.
For us, post-diagnosis, it was just too much too soon, and again, overwhelmingly tragic. Leaflets with endless lists of comorbidities and characteristics, a very patronising poem about Holland, which some parents do like, but I hated, and platitudes from medical professionals that just seemed so insincere after so many months of warnings and advice about tests and screenings. Their tune had changed because Natty was in the here and now, but I knew they didn't mean any of it. How could they? My own ignorance came flooding to the fore, and nonsense tumbled through my head. I thought we would never, ever go to the beach again. We lived 10 minutes from the beach in Cornwall. Would people stare at us as a family? Would she wear institutionalised clothes? Would she have a national health haircut? But mostly, was I good enough to be her mum? And everybody around me seemed to know someone with a child with Downs too. And they wanted to give me their phone numbers, and I didn't want their phone numbers because I didn't want to be in this club. I was shocked too, and overwhelmed by the unknown that lay ahead of us. And I was afraid to love our baby in case we lost her, because then it wouldn't hurt as much. We really didn't know what lay ahead of us, and we just took one day at a time. Again, feeding took all our energies.
That's me and Ollie. To be honest, like I say, I don't think about this stuff much because, as you guys I'm sure know, Janet Carr's research shows that parents remember every word of the diagnosis 20 years after the event. And you guys are not there at that time. It would be so useful if you guys could be there. You guys who know people and who know how valuable people are. You guys who are not afraid. Anyway, you do start encountering people who know people with learning disabilities after your baby's born. But by this stage, in a way, the damage was done because just the existence of the screening and the way it's handled up to that point and the way it's delivered means that you... So what happened to us was Ollie arrived, every action was taken to prevent his arrival, in a way, and then once he was here, people then said, so it's such a big deal before he's identified, and once he's identified, you're surrounded by people going, it's not such a big deal, he's just a normal baby, which is true, but the problem is you feel they're trying to rip you off, because all you know about being a special needs parent is that you have to fight for everything. So unlike Hayley, I started, once Ollie was, I like this word, identified, as opposed to diagnosed. Once Ollie was identified, I strapped on my armour and went to war. And I was constantly trying to fight people that were trying to help me, who were actually saying true things. You know, maybe you guys, or certainly our health worker, saying true things like, just love him. I'm like, you're just trying to deny me my rights! I want physio! And they go, look, he's really too weak now. You don't need physio. And the poor child, I was waving books of carpet samples in front of his face. Did you do that? Stimulating him. Nervous child. He's so overstimulated. I was putting him in a little bouncer in front of the ballet. Going crazy. You know, sometimes I can't settle him now, and I wonder if all the bell ringing and all of that. Bells in his socks. Poor child. Never a moment's peace from his obsessed mother. But you see how, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be doing that, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know, but I just think the disparity between how it's talked about before and what you need to do after sends parents into a blind panic. And then when the health professionals aren't helping, maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't be, I don't know, we know there's cuts, etc., but it just means that a big wedge goes between medics and parents, and we stop trusting the medics. And that's not good for anyone.
And I think that's why we're so passionate, it's because we actually know that that wasn't wrong before. You know, we're living the experience now. There have been challenges along the way for Natty and for us. This is Natty hours after her keyhole heart surgery when she was 2. And the medical angels have carried us forward. I often say that their names have long been forgotten, but their words remain in our hearts. And Sally's talked about people that have helped her family. And for us, you know, it was the... I always talk about this doctor. I must track him down. Tall, dark, extremely handsome doctor in neonatal unit. And Natty was about 4 days old, and he said, "You are going to be an ambassador for children like this." What on earth do you mean? The neonatal nurse who has a daughter with Down syndrome who shared a family photo album with us, who actually became the inspiration for starting a blog for me, just to share those stories to help others. The wise midwife who told me to get down to that hospital and love that baby, whether she lived or died, because she needed my love. The GP, a granddad to a little boy with Down syndrome himself, who welcomed Natty into his open arms and whispered, "These babies are the world's best kept secret, you know." And of course, the heart surgery teams saved her life. So we have so much to be thankful for. But for me, the greatest of the medical angels, it was too great a coincidence to not put Sally's Ollie and our Natty side by side like that, you know, taken in different parallel universes and different times, but there they both are, dressed up in curly wigs. And so, yes, for me, the greatest of the often very unsung medical heroes are the learning disability nurses and the learning disability support teams.
You're quite well kept secret though, because we've never had a learning disability nurse. So, love to know where you are and how to find you, and if I can tag you.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Which is, and I only know about you from being invited to a build conference.
Because the thing for us, the people who've made the biggest difference to us, are people. I mean, as Hayley's been telling me about you guys, the people who can speak hope into your lives, the people who, yes, there was a friend of ours who said, a Jewish friend of ours, who said, we call them mitzvahs, which is blessings, apparently, in Hebrew. There was a lovely German lady who set up a local charity, who made it the charity's ethos that they just talk positively, because you're going around all the places talking about all the things your child can't do this, can't do that, needs help with. And of course, you know, for practical reasons, you do have to identify all those things. But it's so great to have places where you can identify the things they can do, and the things that they're doing really well at. And, you know, that was just really wonderful to have her around. And the portage workers, and also an actress called Juliette Cowan, who was in Pulling, who said to me, "Oh, lucky you, my friend Mary has Down syndrome." And I burst into tears, because it was the first time anyone had said, "my friend." It's always been, I knew one who, it's all that us and them language. I knew one who, there was one who went to university. There was one who, apparently they lived till, it's all talking as if they're, you know, from the moon. And so just that sentence, "my friend Mary." And you guys all have friends with learning disabilities, and you're the guys who can say that. The letter we got from Rosa Monckton explaining that her daughter loved The Simpsons. That just made it all better for me, somehow. Simpsons, what a great show, great taste in comedy, fantastic. Again, it was just taking down that wall between us and them.
And so language is so important, and for us, learning disability nurses have helped us through tonsil operations, and for me, you understand the history. You know there's been surgery and the anxiety that comes for a parent from that sort of history, and helping us through blood tests and all this kind of thing. You liaise between families and medical teams, and you are, you know, listening through tears over a coffee, all these things are vital, absolutely vital. But looking back, I wish I could. We can't turn back time. I can't go back to that first day. But I wish I could just go back and see Natty as just a beautiful, gorgeous, vulnerable daughter who needed a bit of extra support. That's all, not just a label. And there is very good evidence of good practice in the early days with delivering a diagnosis and so on. But sadly, it is all too few and far between. I'm quoting Sally. I found this online, I googled her. So you might like to read your own quotes, Sally.
I think that was from the Mail, so who knows if they're
Oh, well.
Yeah, not a tragedy. Not a tragedy. You guys know that. We don't need to tell you that. You know it's not a tragedy, but everyone thinks it's a tragedy and everyone behaves as if it's a tragedy. And I think we would both say our experience is that it's much more like a sitcom, really. So you know how in a sitcom, like they say, comedy is tragedy played at 120 miles per hour. And yeah, maybe some of the things are a bit tough, and I can tell when I'm talking about my, you guys know this, but when I'm talking about my life to some people, I can see that they go quiet because they can't imagine it. But there's so many laughs along the way. So many laughs along the way, like the stupid wigs. I in a way, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sally's laughs along the way.
Exactly. And just things like, in a way, I was thinking on the way here, the irony is that Ollie is probably exactly what the doctor ordered for my life. I was wanting a very clever girl, that's what I was really wanting. I was going to pay lip service to a course I want them to be, to vote Labour. And be up for equal opportunities and be good with disabled people. But seriously, at home I was planning on hot housing my little girl and making sure she went to a really good school and went on to Oxford, And Ollie has made, I would have said that life wasn't all about A-levels, but he's made me live that life isn't about A-levels. He's rebalanced my life. He's humbled me in a really good way. When I was isolated, I was totally blind to my own privilege, as everyone is. And I'm probably still blind to most of my privilege, but in some areas I'd say I'm more compassionate and I'm just more compassionate person. I like myself much more than I did. And he brings me all the things I love most, actually, which is he forces me to have relationships with people. He forces me, I always think the world is completely obsessed with efficiency, isn't it? Everything we do is geared towards doing things quicker. And if you do things incredibly efficiently, then you actually cut down your interaction with other people. And we're all getting more unhappy. And I wonder if these two things aren't related. I actually wonder if people with learning disabilities, like our children, and like the people you are devoting your lives to helping, don't actually have the most important, have the secret to happiness, the secret to life. You know that thing of just enjoying every moment and waking up and going, I'm thrilled. I am, like Ollie, yay, there's Cocoa Pops! And he does a dance. He's thrilled. Is that not the secret to life, actually? And I want to get him out of the house without talking to him, really. He forces me to talk to him and engage with him. I often feel that I'm parenting. My relationship with parenting is like the relationship a plough has with a field. I'm really doing parenting. Like there is none of parenting that I'm not going to have really done in depth. I have to do it so much. And at the end of my life, I'm going to be really happy about that.
That's wonderful. And so what Sally and I are both saying is that our children are not just a diagnosis or a label. And we need to get away from the sorries and the concerns and words like chromosomal abnormalities and suffering and being afflicted and incompatible with life. And the kind of advice that you get after an antenatal diagnosis, like actual quotes coming now, I can book you in for a termination in the morning. I can't treat you if you continue with this pregnancy. I wouldn't continue if I were you. Your marriage will be over if you don't end this nonsense now. And we need to act fast. If we hear these words from our trusted medical professionals, what chance do we have to make an informed decision that's right for our families? I shudder to think how lucky we are to have slipped through that net.
They say that Special Needs Club is one that nobody wants to join, but when you're in it, you realise that all the best people in the world are in there with you.
Indeed. And we're moving on to the meaty part of the discussion, which Daniel wanted us to talk about. So as to air a few of the ethical considerations around the new NIPT, non-invasive prenatal testing. So we've come up with a list of, I don't know how many of you were on the We LD Nurses Twitter chat recently on the topic. I was, Daniel. Just raising sort of professional questions, thinking about ways forward to implement the testing in the right way, I think, is what everybody wants. And so we have a list of questions which we thought maybe we could bounce around, and then because time is tight, we've gone over already, we can put them online and people can look at them and answer them. We had half an hour.
You want us to stop? Should we stop? Are you tired?
So, some of these questions came from your Twitter chat, some from the Nuffield bioethics investigation which is going on at the moment, and others from parents and medical. But what are the advantages? You've got to be really brief with each answer. The advantages of NIP testing for women.
Well, I think everyone's familiar with the much trumpeted advantages, what their manufacturers, and we have to remember as well that this is the first time that big pharmaceutical companies have been involved in population screening. So for the very first time we have commercial marketing of a test. So it's in their interests to, so for a start, should it be called non-invasive prenatal testing? It is non-invasive, but that implies that it's a direct swap with invasive prenatal testing, which it isn't, because it is not actually diagnostic. It is, it gives a more accurate, so the current screens will give you an 80, so the blood test and the scan will give you an 85% accuracy, and this test, if used on the high risk group, identified as is it greater or less than 1 in 150? If used on that already identified high-risk group, it's 99% accurate, but if it's used on everyone, that accuracy goes down to the early 90s, right? So the advantages are supposedly that it reduces the need for invasive testing, which one has to admit at this stage it probably would, because it would identify, so it will give you you probably know all about this, it'll give you you have a greater than 99% chance of having a baby with Down syndrome, or a less than 1% chance. So anyone who comes into a high probability category would then have the NIPT, and if they got a less than 1% chance, they wouldn't go on to have amnio. The anxiety is that firstly, people won't think before having a blood test. So at the moment, you think very carefully before having an amniocentesis, because the supposed figures, which have been put forward by the manufacturers of the non-invasive prenatal test, they say it's 1 in 100 miscarriages of healthy babies after amnio. The reality is that it's actually, let's not argue with the word healthy for the moment. The reality is that in the big teaching hospitals where these tests are being carried out in the main, it's more like 1 in 500 miscarriage of a baby after amnio. I got lost. The advantages are, at the moment, it would probably reduce the number of people going for invasive tests. That would, the manufacturers tell you, be good because it would reduce miscarriage after amnio, but those figures are debatable. The other reason it would be good is that invasive tests, as you know, are very expensive. So if you reduce the number of invasive tests, that also saves money. The disadvantages are it's kind of unthinking step towards consumer eugenics, obviously.
And some parents also say that they like time to prepare, which is, how do we ensure that those with disabilities are valued equally? And how do we involve people with learning disabilities and Down syndrome in the consultation process? I'm merging 3 questions in one now.
Because I was doing so well with a single question, wasn't it?
Sorry.
Well, this is where we need your help.
This is a key point.
This is a key point. So, Down syndrome's identified in the 1950s, and termination comes in the 1970s. At that stage, it seems that most people confuse Down syndrome with all learning difficulties, all learning disabilities. So it's a no-brainer for the general public to give the thumbs up for termination on the basis of Down syndrome. They don't, at that stage, life expectancy was short and it was automatic to go to institutions. And now the second unlucky thing we've got is, as I say, the entry of big money into the market. It's now a marketplace. So, what was the question? Right. So, and at no stage had people with Down syndrome been consulted. And of course, this is very, very difficult. How do you consult them? For the documentary, I met a lady in Iceland, 32-year-old lady called Haldora, who is working as a librarian, hoping to marry her long-term boyfriend this summer. Happy life. We read a newspaper article because Iceland have now reached 100% termination of identified fetuses before birth. 100, that's everyone who is identified. So the only babies born in Iceland in the past 3 or 4 years have been surprises, have been false negatives. Mm-hmm. And she thought that they were coming to get her alive. And I mean, there hasn't been much research done into the psychological impact of the existence of screening. I don't think. So the question we put to you is like Nuffield, and now the Nuffield Council for Bioethics are now considering NIPT. The government doesn't have to do what they say, but we hope they will. With enough pressure from us, they will. But we really need advocates, self-advocates, because people with learning disabilities have never been included in the discussion. But how are we going to tell them? You guys know, we don't know. I can't tell Ollie, he's 11, I don't want to tell him. Parents don't want to tell their children. We had, I went on Today programme and they said, oh, bring us someone then. If you say they've never been involved, bring us someone to talk to us about it. And so we did manage to find someone, but she'd only found out about screening about 2 weeks before. And all she could really say was choice. I want choice. So this is really hard, and we don't know who to ask for help in this, except you.
And also help with pulling together the advocates with a learning disability, families, midwives, and learning disability nurses, and the test manufacturers. We all need to be working together on this, I think. And the other question, there was one more question that I can't remember.
What I want to say is, I was mentioning earlier that there is definitely a kind of war between, is war? Maybe not war, but there's very mixed feelings towards doctors among the parents of people with Down syndrome. It's partly because of the screening, partly because of the way diagnosis is delivered. There's a lot of pressure to terminate, and obviously people who've continued with the pregnancy feel very angry for a very long time. There's a lot of diagnostic shadowing, as all of you guys know. Also, we've been hard hit and frightened by the DNR orders of last year, frightened about winterborn. We're frightened that doctors are not on our side. The other thing is it's quite a shock realising that you know more than the doctors about your child's condition. It took me a long time to realise that, because you're plugged in specifically into Down syndrome. So I don't know how the body works or anything, but I'm reading the Down Syndrome Research Foundation's posts, and we had to get a attalento-axial instability. We had to get a certificate because Ollie was doing a national gymnastics competition, and it is possible with Down syndrome to have instability here. And he was being repeatedly X-rayed to get a certificate. Now it turns out that you can never prove that you don't have attalento-axial instability from an X-ray. So the British Gymnastics Association were asking for it. The doctors were taking the X-ray lots of different times, couldn't get the right angle, they said. And so there's lots of things like that where, because you're specifically looking for Down syndrome news, you turn the stuff up. And then sometimes we've been very patronised by doctors for looking on the internet, because the wisdom is like, don't for goodness sake let the patient on the internet. But in our situation, we have to go on the internet, because this Down syndrome is very, very rare. It's not like the doctor's fault they don't know about it. It's only 40,000 people in the whole UK. They don't know. And so what we would really like to do, and we're hoping that the documentary and Nuffield might be a springboard for this, is to bring about a peace process. To all try and get on the same side. So get the families and... How did you put it earlier?
Oh, with the LD nurses as a kind of hub.
Yeah, for you as the peace, as Bill Clinton, basically. If you think of this as Northern Ireland, I'm envisioning a way in which you guys can bring that about with NIPT as the kind of starting point. I don't know if that's crazy, but it seems like we love you, you understand us, they don't understand us in the main. Like, obviously some do, but lots don't. And I was on the Today programme with Baski, I'm not going to try the surname, from St George's, who's one of the consultants pioneering NIPT. It's now a fetal medicine centre of excellence. And so I sent him an email after going on the Today programme saying, hey, look, this war, what do you think about trying to start a peace process and negotiations? And he was like, yes, I'm really up for that. And so I went, brilliant, should we do like a heated debate? And he went, no, you fool, that won't help with it. It's like, oh yeah, it's stupid me, of course, that will just make it worse. So we really value your suggestions or volunteering to help us talk to each other. That would be a really wonderful outcome.
And midwives are reaching out too, and very often I think with terminology people just haven't considered the loaded language that they're using and the weight behind it. So what we will do, I'm whizzing through photos now, because it's time to stop. But we see you as the bridge between all the different parties and pulling everybody together. And we will put the full list of questions somehow, we'll work together. And it would be wonderful if we could pull together the answer. I know Daniel's working on some kind of submission to the Nuffield, and we could get that in. But we just want you to know that our lives are enriched by our wonderful children. There's Sally and her boys. My girls, our girls are both wonderful and have enriched our lives in different ways, equally. And when the families got together, that was a magical thing too. And that makes Sally very happy. And I know lots of you are working in these areas. I don't know is Ross here today? He's done a dissertation? No. But there is work to be done on this area, and you all have your own little areas of excellence that you can help with. And
I just wanted to encourage you. I know that Danny was saying that, some people feel uncomfortable talking about NIPT because it's like turkeys not voting for Christmas. You're trying to protect your patch, and obviously that's an unbelievably horrible thing of anyone to say. That's just vile. But to just say that, all of us are biased in this. We parents are biased, supposedly. Well, we are biased. We think they're great. And maybe you're biased. Everyone stands to benefit. That's the thing. The hospitals have already outlaid an enormous amount of money for the technology to do this test. One doctor who I won't name said, because I wrote to him saying, you know, this film that you've made, talking about risk and, you know, boosting talking up the NIPT, talking about risk, and talking about whether a mother has to have an amnio. I said, can you change your language? And he said, yes, I've grown up a bit since I made that film. At that time, I was just very worried that the NHS had spent £200,000 of taxpayers' money on this technology that was not going to be implemented. So everyone is biased. The doctors that you see writing myth-busting pieces online, Huffington Post, they are already up to their necks in relationships with the manufacturers of NIPT. So, and there's no one who, this is like a minority subject, isn't it? No one's interested in this unless they've got a stake. We're not biased, we're stakeholders, right?
And it's here to stay. So I think what we need to do is make sure that it's implemented in the right way. And so we want to say thank you so much to you for what you do and for looking after families like ours.
Yes.
And for understanding and for giving certainly me hope that, you know, as Natty grows up, we all need your services more and more. And yes, I'm ending on a happy family photo. But words count, your words count, and actions count. And thank you so much for listening to us this afternoon.
Yeah, and we're just trying to underline the message that don't need to be perfect, right? It's just fine to be not
just bring
perfect.
it as you go along. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.